The March 12th, 2020 meeting of the Woodbridge Township Board of Education will please come to order. Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Bourdain?
Here.
Mr. Harris?
Here.
Mr. Molnar?
Here.
Mr. Sedana?
Here.
Mr. Tamburello?
Here.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Here.
Mr. Velez?
Here.
And Mr. Delapietro?
Here. Mr. Secretary, as required by the Sunshine Law, please read the notice of meetings.
Thank you, Mr. President. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this Act, the Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted as follows: January 3rd, 2020, and March 2nd, 2020, emailed to the Home News Tribune, the Star Ledger, and the Municipal Clerk's Office, posted in the Avenel Middle School and the Board of Education Administration Building, also published on the school district website.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Secretary. Just for the record, Ms. Anderson is unable to be here tonight. She's conducting the prom dress giveaway. Mr. Tamburello, please read the closed session statement.
Thank you, Mr. President. In compliance with the Sunshine Law, the board must go into closed session in order to discuss subjects exempted from the public portion of our meeting. The discussion to be held in closed session will be regarding personnel matters. Additionally, the board will receive attorney-client advice regarding pandemic preparations. Any information regarding the closed session discussion will be released to the public when the reasons for discussing these matters in closed session no longer exist.
Okay. Do I have a motion? I have a motion made by Mr. Tamburello. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Molnar. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, carried. Okay, at this time we're going to retire to closed session. We'll be out no earlier than 6:30. Okay, please rise for a salute to the flag and a moment of silence.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, do I have a motion to reconvene?
So motion.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Molnar, seconded.
Second.
By Mr. Treadweiser. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, it's carried. Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Bourdain?
Here.
Mr. Harris?
He's coming.
Oh, he's here. Mr. Molnar?
Here.
Mr. Sedana?
Here.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
And Mr. Delapietro?
Yes. Okay, will someone make a motion to approve the minutes of the previous meeting?
So motion.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Treadweiser. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, are there any additions or corrections? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Seeing none, ayes have it. Mr. Secretary, please state for the record any notices of bids received by the board.
Mr. President, there were none at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Dr. Zaga, please state for the record the superintendent's reports for the month of February 2020.
Mr. President, I have the following reports: student registers and fire drill reports, suspension reports for the elementary and secondary schools, bomb threat reports, and the reports of the attendance officers.
Dr. Zaga, would give us the superintendent's agenda?
Mr. President, I have 18 items to present to the board.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a motion for the superintendent's agenda?
So motion.
Okay, motion by Mr. Treadweiser. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Harris. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public?
David Pinkowitz, Island. Normally, for certain things like what I see in items 1 and item 2 on the agenda, normally the board just votes on it. I imagine they accept the word of the superintendent and just move on and don't think much about it. And what I'm talking about specifically is item 1 is to approve the FCC LA Club at JFK to go to the New Jersey State Leadership Conference in Cherry Hill this week, or I guess it's next week. The second item is an amendment of the agenda about a trip to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina for the JFK softball team. Under normal circumstances, if there's no cost to the district, there might be nothing to discuss or nothing to think about. But these are not normal circumstances. What those people watching the board can't see is the social distancing the board implemented on the seating in the room. All the seats are far from each other. Why are they far apart? For social distancing with the COVID-19 or coronavirus crisis that we now have in this country. And even today, things are changing every day. The governor recommended that no one should go to an event with 250 or more people. I wonder if the board even knows if there are 250 or more people at either of these two events. The other thing is, you know, if you look at Cherry Hill, New Jersey, there is a known case of COVID-19 in Cherry Hill. Did the board even give that any thought before this went on the agenda? So what I'm suggesting, and I had an email correspondence with the superintendent yesterday, not talking about these specific cases, because frankly I didn't know about these specific cases, but talking about, is the board going to look at all trips it's approved? It's approved a number of trips, not just what's on today's agenda, but in the past for things that have not yet occurred. And I think it's a legitimate issue. I realize the board, you know, in terms of school closures, is limited by what the state will approve in terms of closing schools as of today. But that same limit doesn't apply when we're talking about extracurricular activities. And I think, you know, the necessary leadership needs to be taken, and the board needs to discuss and seriously discuss whether or not it wants to approve any of these events and whether it wants to cancel those that have previously been approved. And that's, you know, as it showed, you know, back in the Spanish flu days 100 years ago, social distancing, if applied early, worked to slow down the disease, was less likely to overwhelm the hospitals. But if applied too late, if you wait until there's a real crisis in the area, if we wait till the first case in Woodbridge, and we already know there's a case in Edison, right on our border, it might be too late. So I'm just asking the board to think about it. I'll leave it. I'm not going to offer an opinion whether or not you should or shouldn't approve this, but I seriously think the board should offer a real discussion and not just, you know, pass, go to public comment, and then vote yes. Thanks.
Mr. Pickowitz, the board is aware of what's going on. You wouldn't be aware of it yet. If you notice tonight, we came out 15 minutes late. The board is very aware of it. We've been working on a plan since the beginning of the week. We've been following it. This is probably the first time in the history that something like this has happened. They're talking about the possibility of closing down schools for an indefinite period of time. Dr. Sagan and his staff have been working on a plan. If that comes to fruition, we're going to be implementing the incident management system, which we'll be using a fire service all the time to manage a crisis like this. Again, this is unprecedented. Everybody that sits up here has been in meetings going back and forth with this. This is a major decision. Everyone on this board has put a lot of time in. Dr. Zaga and his staff has worked countless hours during the day, coming up with a plan, and then when something else comes out, they have to constantly, you know, update it. The governor came out today at 3 o'clock with his Twitter, and we had to reevaluate our plan again because he came up with the 250-person rule. That's why you're right. The public can't see the chairs, but the chairs are spread out apart. So again, this has never happened. But to say that the board isn't aware, we're very aware. And we take every decision seriously. We don't take anything lightly. And as far as these kids going on a trip, if we approve it and something changes, we could stop them from going. But if I vote tonight to say no, don't send them, then these kids don't have a chance. If something changes tomorrow or whenever, then we have that right. We could change it. So, you know, it's apples and oranges. But don't come here and tell, you know, make a statement that that we don't know. I kind of get offended by that. Everybody up here takes this job seriously. So, again, you know, the board is very well aware of it, and we're kind of in constant communication. Things are happening fast. If you watch the news, You see all the news hype. Everybody's getting all this information. A lot of it's misinformation. And we're getting that information. Our job is, as managers, is to take that information, dissect it, and come up with a plan. Right, wrong, or indifferent, we're going to come up with a plan. If anyone thinks that this is easy, this isn't easy. This is very complicated. The people that sit up at this table and Dr. Zega's staff are educators. They don't manage an emergency crisis every day. And the job that I had for the last 30 years, every call I go to is a crisis. I have to come up with a plan at a moment's notice. I commend Dr. Zega. He put an excellent plan together, and he also gave us a matrix on how, if we have to close schools, the chain of command that they're going to follow, and who's in charge of what. Things like logistics, planning, finance. Again, that's not what he does every day, but he put a plan together, and I commend him and everybody in this room that sits up here. I want the parents and the public to know that every day we are on board with this. We may not say much, but every day we make decisions, and we don't want to create public panic. But rest assured that we're not going to do anything that's going to put anyone in jeopardy. And you can see by tonight, by the spacing of the chairs, there's 6 foot between each chair. That's done for a reason. So if we didn't care, those chairs would be nice and close, but we didn't do that. So just rest assured that we don't take anything lightly. That's what we do. It's what we've been doing. So what it may appear to be isn't always the case. And if anyone has any questions, you have our emails. We're all available. You know, they can ask us any questions.
Mr. President?
Mr. Molnar.
Just, thank you for your clarification and your answer on that. With the committee system, we have been talking about these agenda items Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday during our committee meetings. And the issue about the trips did come up in a conversation I had today with Dr. Zega. It's really not just these 2 trips that are hanging in the balance with this whole uncertainty that faces us. You know, it's spring musicals, it's, fundraisers that other groups have. And things could change. Hopefully for the better, they will change. And like you said, Mr. President, just voting on these 2 items just to have it on the docket, giving them the ability to go if they are able to go. If something happens on the bad side and they can't go, well, listen, and I get it too, and it's hard because there's fundraising that was done. And, there's nothing, we could do about that. We've been working with the Board of Health and monitoring the situation, but to say that we didn't talk about these items, that is unfair, but I take it from the source, so I'm not going to beat up this issue anymore. But the plan is, in my mind, is to pass the 2 agenda items. If the trips get canceled and the children can't go, well, then they can't go. But if we don't give them the ability, in case it does change for the better, and let's all say a prayer that it does.
If I can, Mr. President, I just want to also say that the key here is that, it's one of the few actions that cannot happen, they cannot occur unless the board takes action, are trips. The board is required to approve trips by statute. So if you didn't do that, you would preclude any possibility of doing it, of course, sending the kids on the trip. And then in the end, it's up to the administration to make sure that you have whatever safety measures are in place to keep your kids and your community safe. So again, I think it's very responsible, and I appreciate that you all are doing what you need to do to review the agenda in advance. Obviously, this is a very thoughtful board.
Yes?
Hello, Erin Markin from Colonia. I just saw some news that all of the schools in New Jersey will be closed starting on Monday for 2 weeks. Assuming that news is true and accurate, I was wondering how prepared the school district is for cyber learning, particularly for classified children with IEPs or other classifications. How prepared you are for that to happen?
I don't have that news. Yes. I haven't seen that yet.
Yes, I just got that message.
Yeah.
From the News 12, nothing from, no official correspondence.
Okay.
I haven't gotten an email, I haven't heard. Usually those things would flow down the chain of command. If it's on News 12 and I just saw it, it's news to us. So, but to answer your question, yes, we are fully prepared to teach remotely. We have a plan. you may have gotten the alert that there's a half day tomorrow, and the plan was to have the teachers and the students kind of go over their final plans on how to button up communication and instruction while should we have to close. Now, I can't confirm that, but I saw it. So hopefully we'll get an official directive from the higher ups, and we can make that announcement. And if we do, certainly I'll let everybody know as soon as possible. But as the board president said, this is changing every 30 minutes. So.
And I also wondered with the special ed kids or classified children, will they get their services still?
We are providing services, or someone is providing services for everyone.
Okay.
In addition, and I'd also like to say, we have a plan where if students do not have a device, we will lend them one. If students do not have Wi-Fi at home, we'll be lending Wi-Fi hotspots to anybody who does not have Wi-Fi. So all parents, parents who are watching this, and if they see this, by the time they see this, the schools may be closed.
Okay.
So if you don't have a Wi-Fi hotspot, please call your principal. Wonderful. The administrative staff will still be at work. We'll still be, we're not shutting down. We're just teaching from home. So the administrative staff will still be in. The business office will still be in. I'll be in. The principals will be available by phone. So they will still all be reachable. But any glitches or as you can imagine, there's a tremendous amount of moving parts here.
Yes.
And that's why it took so long to get this plan together. But we are, I'm proud of the way our staff came together and cooperated over the last week to put this plan together. You notice the other districts, they had to take half days and days off and snow days. Our staff, without any question, came forward and cooperated and put together the best possible plan to continue the best possible education for our kids. And we're prepared to move forward. If we have to do it tomorrow, we'll do it tomorrow. If we have to do it Monday, we'll do it Monday. If we don't have to do it, that's okay too. But we are prepared for the long run to make sure that our kids get the proper education and all their support services.
Good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Can I also ask if a parent, if you're not closed on Monday and parents like myself choose to keep their children home? I heard a rumor that they're still marked absent, but they are not. There's a different. It's not held against them or something? Is that true?
That's a great question. Thank you for bringing that up. So we don't have, there's still going to be, if you're not in school and if it's not one of those 5 coded days of excused, it's still going to be marked unexcused. But this is a state of emergency, and at the end of the year when we come back, when the dust settles, we will be reevaluating and taking a look at every particular student who may have accumulated too many absences. By all means, as parents, if you feel better, or if you have a special situation, or if your child has a chronic illness, by all means, stay home.
Wonderful.
Okay? It will not be held against you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And through the chair, Mr. President, to Dr. Zaga, the Honeywell did go out stating the half a day, and you will be sending out another Honeywell tonight, right, to explain what went behind the decision briefly?
That is correct.
Through the chair. Just so the public, thank you. Just so the public has an expectation, Dr. Zaga, part of our pre-plan is that when we do get guidance, if there is future guidance, expect a call Saturday, expect a call Sunday. So please be on alert that you will be, or we'll provide as good and as much communication as possible. And again, this is nothing that's happening on the fly. This is part of our pre-plan that expect a call from Dr. Zaga also over the weekend to keep everybody up to date. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tamburello. Any other questions or comments from the public? Okay, seeing none, roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar?
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Mr. Delapietro?
Yes. Policy and Planning Agenda, Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Policy and Planning Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, presents the following 6 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Harris. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Tamburello. Any comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public?
David Pinkowitz, Island. I had spoken about transportation on its first reading last month. Mr. Harris had followed up with the superintendent to ask This specifically is about meeting the younger students, I think it's kindergarten and first grade, from the bus. And when I raised the issue, there might be where a parent would like an older sibling or somebody else to take the kid from the bus. Mr. Harris asked the superintendent, he said they would work with people. The only issue I have is, it was a first reading for a reason. You bring up issues, and you could modify the policy if necessary. If there truly can be exceptions or would be exceptions, I think it would behoove the board to put those in the policy. And the reason I say that is because if you ever get sued over that specific thing and you have a motion to dismiss because you have proof of, everybody agrees that a request for an exception was made and it was approved and signed for, you might have an early ending of any litigation. While if you don't have that written down and you don't have that in the policy, now you might be litigating something far longer than you need to be. Maybe in the end you still win, but if the policy does allow, if the official stance is there will be exceptions in certain cases, then I believe the policy should read that there will be exceptions in certain cases and allow for that. That's it.
Okay, any other comments or questions from the public? Seeing none, roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar?
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Triebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Mr. Della Pietro?
Yes. Curriculum agenda, Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Della Pietro. The Curriculum Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, present the following 4 items. I move the adoption of the foregoing.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Harris. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I have a second by Mr. Tamburello. Any comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? Seeing none, roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar?
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Triebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Mr. Della Pietro?
Yes. Finance and Insurance agenda, Mr. Tamburello.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Finance and Insurance Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Business Administrator Board Secretary, presents the following 11 items. This evening, I move for the adoption of the foregoing 11 items.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Tamburello. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, seconded by Mr. Treadweiser. Are there any comments or questions from the board?
The Board President,
Mr. Tamburello.
we are in budget season. I always say that 12 months a year is budget season, so there's some important dates associated with that. On item number 5, you can see on April 28th, right here at Avenel Middle School at 6 p.m. is the open public hearing meeting on the school budget. That is April 28th. Our formal adoption is April 30th. So for those folks who want to participate in the budget process, their time to speak up is April 28th, 6 p.m. here at Avenel Middle School. Also, the county filing is March, actually after this meeting, and then it'll be advertised on April the 20th for the April 28th meeting. But here's notification that Open Public Board that we do every year will be on the 28th of April. Please come out and participate in the budget process. I want to thank already Mr. Wolfman, Dr. Zaga for working with the Finance Committee on a couple of changes that we saw with the draft. We're looking forward to a lot of discussions over the next few weeks. Be on the lookout. April is budget month here in the township. Hopefully by the time we wrap up this budget, we'll go back to some normalcy in the district. But thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Tamburello. Are there any questions or comments from the public? Seeing none, roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar?
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Triebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Mr. Della Pietro?
Yes. Transportation agenda, Mr. Velez.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Transportation Committee, on the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Business Administrator Board Secretary, present the following 1 item. I move for the adoption of foregoing.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Velez. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Harris. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, any comments or questions from the public? Seeing none, roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Mr. Delapietro?
Yes. Okay, personnel agenda, Mr. Molnar.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Personnel Committee, on the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, presents the following. Tonight, I will be moving 26 items.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Molnar. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Treadweiser. Are there any comments or questions for the board? Seeing none. Any comments or questions for the public? Seeing none. Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Mr. Delapietro?
Yes. Okay, Mr. Bush, do you have any recommendations?
None at this time.
Okay, is there any old business that should be brought to the attention of the board? Seeing none. Any new business that should be brought to the attention of the board? Okay, seeing none. Just real quick, again, I'd like to thank Dr. Zega and his team with this ongoing crisis. I'd like to thank Mr. Jeffroy for his assistance. You know, this whole thing is quite huge. This whole thing is a team effort. We all operate together. Mr. Jeffroy's, staff, the teachers, the bus drivers, the paras, the secretaries, everybody's part of this solution. Like they said, this has never happened before. We're writing history here. But rest assured that we're going to do our best to get through this. And, when it's all over, we're going to critique it, and we'll put it in the filing cabinet. So God forbid if something ever happens like this again, where we have to go through this, at least we have a playbook. But right now, we're writing history. So bear with us. Like I said, if you have any questions, we're all available. We got our emails. You can call the superintendent's office. But we're going to put out regular public service announcements through Honeywell, our website. So we're going to try to keep you updated as fast as we can, as soon as we get it. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out tonight, and just know that that we are definitely looking out for your kids. Okay, anything else? Anybody? Okay, in keeping with our past practice, we will open this portion of the meeting for statements from the public. If you wish to say something, please come to the microphone and provide your name, part of the township in which you reside, for the record. Please limit your comments to no more than 5 minutes in accordance with Regulation 1100D. Okay, I will not answer any questions until you have completed your 5 minutes to allow you the full opportunity to say what you need to say, as to not interrupt your time.
David Pinkwitz, Island. Before I get to what I was going to comment about, I think I need to respond to some comments made by a few board members before. The board president decided to get offended by my words. And the fact of the matter is, if the board chooses not to speak, and the board was silent during that agenda item, I and the rest of the public have no idea what the board is thinking. So if you're offended, then speak. You have the opportunity, everyone has the opportunity, and if the board chooses to stay silent, don't be offended by me or any other member of the public to talk about an item on the agenda. I offered my opinion, you don't agree, or you think I was going too far or made an implication you didn't like. If you want to clarify things, fine. But to take offense is outrageous. And for Mr. Molnar to say, I take it from the source. I've been going to board meetings for a long time. And the fact of the matter is, when I've made statements, whether it was back in the cheating scandal, when the whole board said there was nothing going on, their own investigation showed nothing, and I said, you're wrong. I was right. The board was wrong. When I brought forward about the transportation agenda some years ago, where there was a bus that didn't have the appropriate number of students on it for a private route, I was right. And the next year it was off the agenda. So I try to do my research before I speak. And when I offer an opinion, I try to state it's an opinion or make it clear it's an opinion. But I take offense for the fact that a board member would attack any member of the public, including myself. And I think it's just wrong. Now on to my comment, which should hopefully be much less controversial. My daughter takes ASL, American Sign Language, as her foreign language, which is approved as a foreign language in New Jersey. I discovered something this year that I think the administration needs to be aware of and make counselors aware of, which is that there are some colleges when you apply that have foreign language requirements. There's two kind of levels of that. One is a graduation requirement. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about specifically is an admissions requirement where they say you must take 2 years of a foreign language or whatever. Different schools have different requirements. Many have no requirement at all. It turns out that in some of these schools, the requirement is very specific. Foreign language to them means literally that, a foreign language. Spanish, French, it might be others, but it's not American Sign Language. The relevance to that and why I'm bringing it up is not to say my daughter's very happy taking ASL, but when she was doing some research about college, I discovered first online and then I confirmed it with the admissions office that this particular university, in this case it was Northwestern University, did not accept for their 2-year foreign language requirement, did not accept American Sign Language. I bring that up because people need to understand and should know. I mean, it's hard in 8th grade to know where somebody might want to go, which is when some of these kids are making their freshman schedules. But counselors need to be aware, and the children need to be aware, and their parents need to be aware that it could potentially become an issue at some universities. Not all universities. You could still go to Stanford, you could still go to Yale, you could still go to many other hundreds or thousands of universities around the country. I'm just making you aware that there are some, at least as of today. That doesn't mean it won't change in a year or 2 or 3, but there are some as of today that will not accept ASL as a foreign language for admissions requirements. And in those cases, those students will not be able to obtain admission to those schools. Thanks.
Mr. President?
Mr. Mullen.
Just to comment, I'm sorry that, Mr. Pinkowitz is offended that we got offended. But knowing his track record, and if he goes back and watches this on TV 35, sitting in his chair, he knows what his motive was when he came up to make the comments, that we sat silent and that we didn't even realize what we were voting on. So I'm sorry if he was offended that we answered back defending the board. But for everybody out there who don't know, the board, Mr. Pinkowitz has been to a lot of board meetings in his, residency here in Woodbridge. He even applied to become a board member. So he knows the committee system, how it works, and how these agenda items are talked about and are brought out of committee and goes to the full board, for the vote. So, he could sit there and say he's offended that we got offended, but we know his motives. A lot of people that watch the meetings on a regular basis know his motives. He has never been one to work with the board or the community. It's always the Monday morning quarterback, like a couple times when he's come to the board meetings and, when we were talking about older schools and why don't we build schools, and then we build a new school, but it's not the way to build a new school, the way we build a new school. And I don't want to get into it, and to self-proclaimed how he discovered the cheating scandal on his own. I mean, we could go back and forth that him saying that the board didn't realize there was a cheating scandal going on, and I don't want to start going back into all that, but I mean, in his mind, he's the self-proclaimed founder of the cheating scandal. But, I'm sorry that you felt offended that we defended ourselves, but in my mind, and I'll only speak for myself, you knew what you were doing when you came to the microphone, and you knew the innuendo that you wanted to put out there, because you're the king at that. You're the king at putting the innuendo out there and then hiding behind the fact that you're just a concerned citizen coming to ask a question. You're crafty the way you ask your question, because it's always followed, it's surrounded by an innuendo. So that's why we reacted the way we did, was to defend the comment that you made. Thank you.
Mr. President?
Mr. Stein.
This is just a general statement that I would like to make. It's a state of emergency. We have
a lot of people, parents, administrators, teachers, faculty, staff, board members that that live in Woodbridge and trust their kids to come to the schools in Woodbridge. So first of all, thank you for that. It's a trying time for all of us, not just the kids who go to school or the parents, but everyone in the community at large. It is my humble and honest request to everyone that in this time we're only human. We show a little extra empathy, a little extra compassion, and a little more kindness to our fellow community members, whether they be part of the school system or not. It's just a request, and I think we will find that if we behave a certain way, that it'll come back to us. I just would like to make that humble request. As a board member, I have this platform to say that, and I would like to thank the president and our excellent administrative staff that have put the plans together in place. I think someone mentioned that every minute feels like a week going through this because news updates are coming in, you know. So I really appreciate the parents and the community members that are here, all the support that we have, and just again a humble request: just be a little more compassionate, a little more kind than usual. Everyone's on edge, you know. Let's understand that we're all human, and I think we'll all get through this. This too shall pass. And whatever the decision may be, you will be informed. So thank you very much.
The chair will, at this time, will entertain a motion to adjourn. Oh, sorry.
Can I just ask a quick question, Aaron Mark in Colonia? Why are we closing early tomorrow, the early dismissal? Is it to prep more, or the reason?
The reason why we're closing is, as by the way, that was a hoax.
I think it was too. Yes, I'm sorry for bringing that up.
Bergen County is closing. That's a different story altogether.
Counties are closing kind of one by one at this point, but the reason why the 250 person gathering limit, our middle school and high school lunches are the only times that we have that many students in one spot. So to avoid the 250 people gathering, we have a half day, so we don't serve lunch to middle school and high school. Elementary school, they can eat lunch in their classrooms. So
we anticipate that if we do have school next week, we will have all half days also, so that high school and middle school don't eat in the cafeteria?
I can't answer that yet.
Okay.
There's a press conference tomorrow from the state office, and we hope to get further guidance at that point. At this point,
thank you.
Like I said, this is changing every 30 minutes.
Yes, and I also do want to say thank you very much. This is a hot time and a difficult time for you all and for the parents. Thank you for clarifying that, because I'm sure everybody will be asking that later. So thank you, and the more information, the better. Thank you very much for sharing.
I will tell you, we don't need extra time to get ready. We're already ready, and we will be ready.
Mr. President? And the one thing, you know, when we ask the public out there, with all the number of students that we have in this district, I mean, the plan is in place, but I'm sure there are going to be individual cases that, you know, people will have some issues with. We'd be naive to think that that wouldn't be. Just if Dr. Zaga, as we mentioned before, you know, communication is going to be key during all this. You know, updating through Honeywell, updating through or Instant Alert, you know, on the web page, if, you know, you could, you know, record a couple messages and just keep the parents, you know, all, because if it does come into play, this plan, we will be getting phone calls. Well, did you think about this? Did you think about this? Everybody's unique in the community, and that's why we ask just that you have patience. We will try to answer everybody's issues coming up, you know, with this. And like Mr. Zidane said, we have to, you know, all work together. If we don't work together on this, we're sunk. So we're all going to have to, you know, when they always say it takes a village, well, it's going to take a village on this one. You know, so we are in uncharted territory, but if we all do work together and we all cooperate with one another, and, you know, we'll be able to get through this.
Thank you, Mr. Muller.
Hi, good evening. My name is Gervin Dahar. I'm a student from John F. Kennedy Memorial High School. So, as you know, tomorrow is a half day, and if that doesn't result in Monday being off or the following weeks being off due to COVID-19, what is your plan for limiting the spread of the virus throughout schools? Because right now students aren't very informed on how to limit the spread of the virus. Also, administrators throughout Woodbridge Township schools aren't exactly using their tools and time to bring forth information to limit the spread of germs. So what is your plan, like through maybe assemblies or information through administrators to students? What would be your plan for that if schools weren't to close?
If schools were not to close, an assembly would be the exact opposite of what we want to do.
Yes. So
we would utilize, the message is very simple. Wash your hands, don't touch your face, and avoid large crowds. That is from every health organization that's out there. So there really is no more directives than that. So, you know, you could wash your hands as many times as you want, don't touch your face. The problem is in schools, by their nature, are large gatherings.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to spread, to prevent the spread of the virus in a school, which is why all the schools are closing.
Yeah.
So let's wait out tonight. Let's wait to hear from the governor tomorrow, and then hopefully we'll have more specific directions. But at this point, we have a half day. We're going to try and keep students as separate as possible. I know at JFK there's 1,200 students.
Yeah.
So it's hard to avoid a large gathering of 1,200 students. So, but at lunch is the largest gathering. That's why we don't have lunch. That's why we have a half day.
Yeah.
But you kind of see where this is headed.
Exactly.
You know? Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Dr. Sega? Through the chair. Would it be possible, you know, per the student's recommendation, that perhaps the school nurse offer those 3 tips to students of the loudspeaker tomorrow, perhaps, homeroom or first period, just refresh students of those, general hygiene tips? Would that be possible?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, the chair at this time will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So motion.
Motion made by Mr. Molnar. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Mr. Harris. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Seeing none? Carried.